Welcome to Enchanted Astrology with Ariel Smith. This is the Quantum Zodiac series, and today we are exploring the planet Mars. Now, when we think of Mars, we often think of things like action or drive or anger even, or ambition, right? And today, however, we're looking at Mars as the law of thermodynamics. So we're looking at Mars as energy, as direction, and as entropy. It is the irreversible arrow of experience. Now, Mars is a principle that says energy moves, energy transforms, and energy cannot go backward. So once direction is introduced into a system, something happens that can never be undone. Now, in physics, thermodynamics tells us that energy disperses and entropy increases and systems move toward transformation. So you cannot reverse time because there is memory. And if there's memory in the system, it cannot be reversed. It could because it remembers. So this is Mars. And so Mars is not necessarily just all chalked up to motivation. In this framework, Mars is the fact that energy moves at all. So when we bring astrology into this, we know that Mars rules two signs. It rules Aries and Scorpio. And we can ask, well, what do these two expressions represent within this thermodynamic, this energy system? Well, Aries represents the macrostate of the system, and Scorpio represents the microstate. So in thermodynamics, the microstate refers to the invisible, the microscopic configurations of energy within the system. And these microscopic configurations determine what is possible at the macro level. So Scorpio is the microstate, and we know that Scorpio governs things like subconscious processes, trauma imprints, shadow material, any stored survival responses, right? This fine-tuning of our energetic energy, this intensity, and this is energy beneath the surface. So this is energy being used in places that you cannot consciously see. It's that microstate. And so if this energy is being used at the micro level, it affects what is now available at the macro level. So if someone has unprocessed trauma, unresolved resentments, maybe there's like a survival loop or something, there is energy being used there, and that means it's not available for forward motion for the macro state. So when someone says something like, I want to move forward, but I can't, we look to Scorpio Mars because the microstate determines the macro capacity. Now, Aries is the macro. It's that movement. It's not really looking to analyze things on the micro like Scorpio does. It's not really digging into anything. It's simply just moving forward. It's a direction that is following and it's going in that direction. And Aries, we know, represents direction and momentum and initiation, right? It's that forward movement. And Aries is only as effective as the microstate allows. So if Scorpio is dealing with this chaotic, suppressed, resentful energy, Aries can become impulsive or reactive or angry, maybe even explosive, right? But if Scorpio is well integrated, then Aries becomes more efficient and clean in its direction, right? It's Aries, evolved Aries is very decisive and direct and efficient. So it's this precision of the direction of energy. So now if we take a step back and look at this from a bigger view, in the quantum view, we are infinite potentiality. That is what we are. We are the infinite exploring itself in infinite ways. And the more we learn, the more there is to learn. So the universe is expanding because of that. And entropy increases because of that, right? Because the more the infinite explores itself, the more there is to explore. That's the nature of it being infinite. It will never stop that process, because if it stopped, it would not be infinite. The very definition and nature of it being infinite means it goes on forever. And Mars is the will of the infinite to explore itself through direction. So it's choosing a way to go, and it's saying, let's go that way. And once we go that way, something happens that can never be undone. We're exploring something and creating a memory from that experience that cannot be undone. And thermodynamics itself tells us that you cannot go backward. And this is also shown by Scorpio being co-ruled by Pluto, because Pluto also governs that system memory. In quantum mechanics, states cannot be perfectly replicated. You cannot replicate a quantum state. So once an event occurs within this framework of time and direction, it is recorded, and it will never be able to be recreated in exactly the same way. And we learned this in the Pluto episode of this series. A great time to go back and refresh if you feel called to, but it is in the expression in Mars, Scorpio being co-ruled by Mars and Pluto are both speaking to this memory in the system. So a little example of maybe how to grasp this. I'm not sure if anyone has ever had this experience, but I have, where you've read something for the first time and it was so profound that it almost changed you, right? You read something and you just feel it in your body. Maybe you get goosebumps. You feel something shift, and you have to pause and just absorb what just happened. And when that happens, it's so profound, I've wanted to go back and read it again a second time. And so you go back and you read it again, and it's meaningful, but it's just not the same. You don't get the same experience the second time you go back to read those words on the page, it's just not the same, right? So you cannot recreate that experience that you had when you first read it. Or you can think of it in terms of giving a speech even, right? The first time you deliver a speech, there's something very alive that moves through you, and there's these emotions, and you cannot recreate that the next 20 times you do it. It's different, right? Because you're dealing with direction, and these microstates have shifted now. The system has memory, and so Mars and Pluto together show us that once energy moves with direction, there is something that is unreplicable. You cannot replicate it. And your life cannot be duplicated. Right? So every single life on earth is under that law of not being able to be replicated. So it's so important that we all live our lives because we are the only ones who can. It will never be able to be replicated, right? Your path cannot be reversed. And that is so incredibly sacred. So now if we start to bring in vices and virtues, if Mars is energy, right? It's talking about the states of energy. Then we can look at some of the distortions, maybe. So wrath, which is a vice, would be a distortion in terms of being uncontrolled energy, right? If maybe the microstate is overloaded, then it's going to lead to this discharge in the macrostate. It's uncontrollable, right? So maybe there's too much unprocessed stimulus, or suppressed survival energy, unhealed shadow work or something, just too much unintegrated Scorpio energy can lead to that discharge. It affects the Aries state, right? Lead to that discharge in the macro. And so the virtue of patience, right? The vice is wrath, the virtue is patience. Patience is storing energy. It's containing it and channeling it in a meaningful way, right? So it's a purposeful, directed energy. And Scorpio, especially evolved Scorpio can be extraordinarily patient, right? The Scorpio of all Scorpios is known for biding its time, for waiting for the opportune moment. It can be incredibly patient, and it understands what the system is doing before it moves into action. So when Scorpio holds that energy, refines it and holds it, Aries can strike cleanly, right? Aries can become incredibly decisive and direct and efficient in that case, and it's not reactive, it's very intentional. So as we start to look at astrology from this type of a lens, it helps us to make a shift, because astrology obviously is quite known for being where the sun sign astrology, right? Where we just have this habit of like identifying with one particular sign, over identifying with that. And this is a more holistic way to look at it, where we're not just labeling ourselves as one sign, right? Maybe yes, you have a Scorpio sun, and that is a prominent energy that you are working with in this incarnation, but you also have a Mars, right? We all have the planet Mars in our chart, and Mars contains both Aries and Scorpio in it. And those signs, Aries and Scorpio, will fall somewhere in your chart by house. We all have those energies in our chart. So, and Mars itself is somewhere in our chart. So then it allows us to shift away from just saying we are one sign to understanding ourselves more holistically, where we can now look into where are our microstates, right? What is the direction that our chart is showing? Where are we storing our energy in this Scorpio? It's also a good way to incorporate signs that you may have a tendency to project or look down on, right? Because when we identify very strongly with one sign, we tend to look down on other signs a bit, and we aren't integrating that within ourselves, because what is in one is in the all. So it gives us the opportunity to look at those signs and their ruling planets in our chart to understand why we may have a tendency to project them or disown them within ourselves and our own charts. And this ultimately builds more compassion and shifts us away from a materialist, I am this and not that view, into a more holistic, this is how I fit into the whole kind of perspective. And the whole is also within me. So just synchronistically, intuitively, I kind of feel this is a good reminder to bring up for the Mars episode specifically, because it does deal with the shadow themes and that use of energy and a redirection of energy. And if we are feeling angry or resentful or anything, it's a sign to work with that Scorpio expression of Mars, right? Because Scorpio can dig into exactly what is going on beneath the surface. It can't be fooled, and it will uncover what is really going on within our own energy. Now, I do have a Mars Yin Yoga class available on my website that explores these exact themes. And Yin Yoga itself is actually very supportive for Scorpio Mars energy, because we hold poses for several minutes and we work into the deep tissues, the connective tissues, the fascia, the hips especially. We store often emotion and stress. And the first time I took a Yin Yoga class, I was surprised by how much emotion surfaced. It was quite profound. It was this energy releasing from somewhere deep within my body, and afterward I felt so much clearer. And if Scorpio represents stored energy at the macro level, Yin can help to gently release some of that energy. And when that energy is no longer tied up beneath the surface, it now becomes available for Aries, for that outward expression, the macro, right? For movement, for direction and momentum. So if you've been feeling stuck, it may not mean that you need to push harder. It may mean that something needs to be released, right? So if this resonates, if you feel called to, you can absolutely explore that Mars Yin class available at enchantedastrology.ca. And as always, thank you so much for joining me for another Quantum Zodiac episode. Stay tuned for the next episode where we explore the planet Venus.